If you're a dad or an uncle like me, there's a good chance you can relate to the feeling of just needing your own quiet space sometimes, no matter how small that space may be. So in this video, I'm taking this old closet that's filled with junk and turning it into a state-of-the-art gaming pod, complete with soundproofing insulation, fully immersive lighting, and even a motion simulator. Oh yeah, and I almost cut off my thumb too. That's not good. If your house has a basement, there's a good chance you have a closet under your stairs that looks a little something like this. This has literally just been the set everything I don't want to deal with right now closet, and over the years it's filled up with a lot of junk. So today's the day I deal with this mess. I started pulling stuff out. A lot of this is from when I originally started doing YouTube 4 or 5 years ago. And as I dug deeper into this closet, I found some stuff from the construction of the house in 1990, so I'm not sure this closet has actually ever been cleaned out. These closets have a terrible use of space as stuff just gets buried and forgot about. And after I cleaned this out, I'd say I kept like maybe 5 to 10% of the stuff, and the rest was thrown out or donated. So now I've got a blank slate to start building my ultimate gaming pod. First off, I'm cutting out any of this excess drywall and anything else on the walls that needs to come out, as well as removing this pull string light and the drywall behind it so I can run some wires through here, and then I'll put that drywall back up later. So now I'm going to be running a few extra outlets into here. I flicked off the breaker, and then I have one of these current pens. You can just hold this up to a wire and see if it's live or not, so it's really convenient for this kind of thing, making sure you don't trip a breaker or electrocute yourself. And now that I know that wire's dead, I'm going to cut this and reroute it to a couple extra outlets, as well as a light switch and a pot light in the ceiling. Have an electrician do this if you don't know what you're doing. I'm not here to tell you how to do any electrical work, because I'm definitely not a professional myself. Like all my videos, this is a very learn at your own risk. Now that my outlets are roughed in, I'm going to move on to a little bit of soundproofing. I have some of this 3.5 inch thick rock wool safe and sound insulation. This isn't going to make it perfectly soundproof, but it is going to go a long way in not having noise from the outside pass through into the gaming closet, as well as vice versa. Loud noises are still going to obviously be hearable through this, but it is going to drown them out pretty well and make the space feel a lot more quiet and secure, as well as take away that hollowy echo sound. So for a job this size, you could easily just use a serrated knife to cut this, but a good tip to cut large quantities of this is use an old turkey cutter, and it makes slicing this effortless. So next I have some of this 1/2 inch Sonopan soundproofing panel. This is made from some recycled wood fibers. and usually goes underneath floor or behind drywall to aid in soundproofing. So first I'm just cutting some pieces to size using a circular saw. I'm going to be adding this onto the underside of the stairs, just to aid in stopping some of that noise from people walking down the stairs. You could also add this onto the wall studs in behind your final paneling or drywall. I'm not going to do that because I'm really limited on space in here and that would kick the walls out another inch or two. But that's a viable option if you want even more superior soundproofing. Then I added that ceiling sheet of drywall back on and mudded up the screw holes and any dents. I took a circular template and traced that onto the ceiling and cut that out with a multi-tool. I'm going to be installing a pot light here that the light switch inside the door will control. This pot light is left over from my tiny house, and these have dual function. You can turn on the light normally, but if you shut it off and leave it off for 1 second, then turn it back on, it'll turn on to this halo mode, which is great for ambiance. Also left over from my tiny house build is some of this 8-inch pre-primed shiplap pine board. This stuff gets nailed directly onto the studs and clicks together like so. And I have just enough left over to finish up this closet. So first I'm going to be giving it 1 coat of paint before I install it. The main idea with this is painting that interlocking tongue. Since this paneling is made of solid wood, it's going to move a bit with the seasons and humidity. And if you don't pre-paint that seam as the wood moves, you're going to keep exposing an unpainted portion of the wood. So it's easy to just give these 1 coat before they go up. I'm just using this because I have it left over, but honestly just use drywall. It'll be cheaper and accomplishes the same task, unless you're really set on the shiplap look. It's also easier to mount stuff to because it's solid wood, so there is a few benefits to it for sure. So next I went back to the closet and I'm taking as many accurate measurements of the space as I can, so that I can measure out a batch of these boards and cut them all at once and take them down rather than running up and down the stairs for every individual cut. I cut these quickly with my miter saw, but if you don't know a miter saw, you can easily just use a square to mark your cut line, and then cut that line with the circular saw. This saw specifically is one of the cheapest circular saws around, and it does the job just fine. So now I can start installing this shiplap. My tools of choice for this is a small level and a brad nailer. I'm using a 15 gauge nailer here if you have one, but a brad nailer will work just fine. So this is pretty self-explanatory to install. With my first board, I'd block it up and make sure it's level, and then sink some nails right at the bottom, as well as along the tongue on each stud. Then I can start working my way up, nailing only the tongue from now on. To make any unique cuts around receptacles and whatever else, I would just mark out the cut lines with a tape measure and square, and then cut that out with a jigsaw. And these don't kick up too much dust, so I could just do this right down in the basement and sweep it up after. This shiplap system self-hides the nails once the next board is installed over the tongue and makes a really clean look in the end. Once I had all the boards installed, I whipped out my white caulk and filled in any of the exposed gaps or nail holes I knew weren't going to be covered up by trim. And now it's ready for a final coat of paint. So now I'm going to be building up the desk base cabinet that sits inside the closet. And I have some of this 3/4 inch pre-finished maple plywood left over from my tiny house build again. This doesn't necessarily have to be pre-finished or 3/4 inch, this is just what I have around. And I'm starting off by cutting a bunch of pieces to size with my track saw. I'm basically going to be making some cabinets here the same way you would make kitchen cabinets, and in my last video I covered this in a lot of detail. So I'm not going to spend too much time on making this cabinet, but I will show you the gist of how they're put together. It's a pretty straightforward process. First off, these cabinets are going to have one drawer that pulls out from the front. So I'm marking out this drawer opening and then pre-drilling the corners and cutting out the lines flush with the jigsaw. After that, I can start nailing together the 4 sides of each cabinet. I'm just using a brad nailer to do this, and then I'll come back and pre-drill a screw hole and just use a number 8 deck screw to screw this together rigidly. To add some strength to the cabinets, I'm going to be adding some blocking. And I marked this out so that these would be flush with the opening of that drawer, so that this not only gives the cabinets some strength and keeps them square, but I can also mount the drawer slides for that bottom drawer onto them. Now once this goes inside the gaming closet, I'll be able to screw the 2 cabinets together like so, and then they'll work as one unit. Next, I cut up some more plywood to make the drawers. And I added some pre-finished maple edge banding onto this, so that the top of the drawers have a finished edge and aren't showing that bare plywood core. Then I nailed the 4 pieces of each drawer together. And used some more scrap plywood to cut out a bottom, and just nailed that flush onto the bottom of the drawer walls. Now this cabinet will have 4 drawers that pull out, and make some use of that low headroom space that's deep in the back of the closet. Now before I install these cabinets, some of these drawers are actually going to pull out into the hallway here, so I have to cut the openings for those. Using a tape measure, I marked out the heights of the cut lines, and then I'm using a laser level to make sure I have a nice level line for all the openings. I marked my cut lines with a pen, and then I'm using this long drill bit to drill out each of the corners. This transfers the corners to the outside wall so that I can take some measurements out there and make sure everything's in the right position before I cut too much out. With all those corners in the right spot, I used a multi-tool to complete the cut from the inside without causing too much damage to the drywall. I sanded off the rough edges of the cut and vacuumed up all the dust. And now I'm ready to bring in those cabinets. So I built these cabinets to be the exact same size as the spacing of the studs in the wall, so that the drawers can slide out between the studs and I don't have to make any modifications to the wall itself. So I had to buy some extra long drawer slides off of Amazon. These were 36 inches. And I can mount the slides onto the cabinet frame and then remove the drawer portion of the slide and install it on the drawer and slide the drawer into place. This makes use of all of that space underneath where the desk is going to be and makes this accessible in the hallway instead of in the closet, which makes this even more usable in my opinion. With all the junk I'd stored in here before, I bet you all the stuff that I actually kept could be stored in the 3 drawers that open up into the hallway alone. Then all of the rest of the closet space can be fully dedicated to my gaming room. I used a couple metal brackets to mount those cabinets in line with the studs so they don't move. And now on to making the drawer faces. I have this piece of 1/2 inch MDF and it's cut just a little bit bigger than the final size of my drawer face. And then this 1/4 inch piece of MDF. In my latest tiny house video, I built some really nice kitchen cabinets, but they're also really expensive and really time consuming. So in this video, I'm just going to be using this MDF, which is cheap and easy to work with, to make some pretty similar doors. So I cut that 1/4 inch MDF into a bunch of 2.5 inch wide strips, and then used a miter saw to cut them to length. Now I have my face backing panel and all the 1/4 inch strips, and I'm just going to be applying some wood glue onto the back of the strips and gluing them on around the perimeter of this piece to make a shaker profile cabinet door. I'd use some 5/8 inch brad nails to tack that into place while the glue dries, and fill any gaps with some wood filler. After lunch, I can do a quick surface sand. And then I'm going to be measuring out the final dimensions of my door panel and trimming all 4 sides clean with the track saw. Like I said before, I originally made this panel a little bit large so that I could trim this down and have a flush edge around the whole thing. But if you don't have a track saw, this step is unnecessary. You could just cut it to the right size at first and sand the edges. After it's been cut to its final size, I can give it a quick sand along the edges and then use this 1/16 inch round over bit to give that a finished edge. And those are some finished cabinet door faces ready for some primer and paint. All in, each one of these doors probably only costs like $3 or $4 and took me a couple hours to make them all. MDF is really cheap, easy to find, and beginner friendly, and this is a good beginner project if you want some new cabinet doors. After a coat of primer, I just applied some of the same paint that's on the walls themselves, so that these doors don't stand out too much. This is just normal wall paint, not cabinet paint, and I just applied it with a foam roller, so it's not perfect, but it's absolutely fine for this application. After I installed those faces and added some handles, these drawers are complete. And I've now added some functional storage space in the low clearance portion of this closet. Next, I ordered this modern glass panel door to replace the original wooden door to make the closet turned gaming pod a little less claustrophobic when you're in it. So I removed the hinges of the old door, and then this new door is the exact same size, so it'll set in the jamb without any modifications. But first I have to take this to my shop to get this door ready to be mounted. So I use this Ryobi hinge jig to route in some slots for the hinges. And then I needed to drill for my handle, as well as a deep slot to accept the door latch. And this is where it gets a little bit gruesome.
Oh, that's not good. Did not go as planned.
After that had a bit of time to heal up, I'm back in the shop to continue installing that door latch. And of course, the next tool I have to use is obviously the one that bit me.
Awesome.
So with my left hand well out of slice range this time, I did the last bit of routing I needed to finish up this door. And I made it through with no catastrophic injuries. Honestly, this was a good eye-opener to be a lot more careful with the tools. When you use tools every day, you're bound to fall into some bad habits, so this is a good wake-up call. I'll also be getting a saw stop, because if something like this happened on a table saw, those fingers would be gone just like that. So I gave the door a couple coats of some satin black door paint, and then cut away the film over top of the glass that was left on by the factory. They leave this on so you can paint the door to whatever you need and remove it once you're done, no need to tape anything. So that's an appreciated touch. Now with this door ready to go, I can take it back to the basement and get it installed on the jamb. And that few-hour task turned into a couple weeks, but whatever, I'm pretty happy I still have all my fingers. It's a nice door too, makes the space feel a lot bigger than the solid wood door. As I was working on the door, I had also installed this flooring. This is some walnut laminate flooring that was pretty cheap at Home Depot and somewhat matches the 20-year-old floor that's in the basement. And this is pretty easy to install. I just cut all the pieces to the same length using a circular saw, making all my cuts outside to again limit the amount of dust in the basement, and then took them down to the closet and clicked them into place. This floor already has underlay attached to the bottom of it, so you don't have to do any other prep other than vacuum the concrete. And now we nearly have a finished room. Next step is making up a desktop. So there's a million different things you could use to make a desktop. I'm going to use some materials I have laying around and left over. I have this piece of 3/4 inch walnut veneer plywood that's left over from the tiny house. And this basically just has a thin sheet of walnut glued to the outside of a 3/4 inch plywood panel. Walnut plywood is a little bit harder to find than, say, maple, but you can special order this from most hardware or lumber stores. So I took some pretty precise measurements of the width of the room, and then I'm cutting out my plywood panel using a track saw. Then I have this scrap piece of 3/4 inch plywood that I'm going to glue onto the bottom of my main piece to give it a little bit of extra thickness on the front edge. So that I can cut up this scrap piece of walnut and fix it on the front edge of the plywood to basically be a big thick piece of edge banding. This is the part of a desk that takes all the wear from hands and wrists and any dings, so this will withstand all those forces and wear a lot better than actual edge banding and look a lot better in the meantime. So I glued that piece onto the plywood and then I'm just tacking it in place with a few brad nails to hold that, and I'll fill any gaps or cracks or holes with some walnut wood filler. After that dried up for an hour or so, I lightly sanded away the excess, making sure not to go through the walnut veneer. And then I have this chamfer bit in my router, and I'm going to take this along the front edge to soften that corner and give it a little more comfortable feel on the wrists that will be resting on it. Now that's a pretty cheap way to make a solid looking walnut desktop. To finish this up, I'm going to be using some Rubio Monocoat. This is a 2-part oil that you mix together and then drizzle it onto the wood. And then I use one of these white foam applicator pads to wipe this into the wood. And after that's soaked in for a few minutes, I'll come back with some clean towels and wipe off as much of the excess as I can. And that's it for the finish. You don't have to wait to let it dry or worry about any dust settling in it or brush strokes. It's simple as put it on and wipe it off. And now let's install it in the gaming room. I made it a little tight of a fit, but eventually got it into place and fastened it with a few screws and a couple of L brackets to support the overhang. On to one of the finishing touches, at least from a construction standpoint. I had a few pieces of the wallboard left over, so I cut them down into some trim-sized pieces and went around the room trimming out the door, the corners, and finally the baseboards. I fastened these with a brad nailer, filled the nail holes and gave it a quick coat of paint, and on to the next step. So the computer and lights and everything are going to be housed on top of the desk inside the closet, which is a pretty small confined space, and it's going to heat up pretty quickly. So I ordered this room-to-room ventilation fan that I'm going to install in this wall between the gaming pod and the hallway, and this will intake fresh, cool air from the hallway into the closet right around where the electronics are, and help cool down the room if the door's closed. This one's pretty cool because it runs on a thermostat, so you can set your desired temperature, and if the room temperature goes above that setting, The fan will kick on and fresh air will be introduced into the closet. And the fan will turn off once the room has been adequately cooled. To blend this in, I gave it a coat of the same color of wall paint. And now let's start moving in electronics. First off, I have these Govee LED strip lights. And these are a really cool product because they come across as a full neon strip with no hot spots. Almost all other LED strips, you can see where the bulb is, even under the diffuser covering, but these ones have fully consistent color and brightness along the entire strip. Govee markets these as a desk light to go around the perimeter of your desk, but these have so many other purposes, they're honestly the best LED strips on the market right now. So I'm going to install these along the perimeter of the room, and these come with a sticky backing, so I'm basically just sticking this right onto the wall alongside the trim. I also 3D printed up some of these brackets to make the transitions around the corners a little bit softer and more professional looking. And for not very much money, these couple of strip lights completely change the atmosphere of this room. The Govee app has all kinds of these scenes and colors you can pick that each make the lights dance in a different way or react to music or really whatever you can think of. But I have a different idea on how I'm going to control these lights, which I'll get into shortly. So powering this gaming room, I have this pretty mid-range gaming computer equipped with a 4070 graphics card and 64 gigabytes of RAM. So I'm actually going to have this gaming computer sitting on its side to take up less space on the desk. So I 3D printed these feet and just stuck them on to allow airflow at the bottom still. For a monitor, I bought this 34-inch curved ultrawide monitor. This is only a couple inches narrower than the room itself, so it should be a pretty immersive feel. I'm mounting it to the wall with one of these hydraulic monitor mounts to take up as little desk space as possible. And these mounts are really cool because you can just push the screen wherever you want to adjust it to, and it pretty much just stays there. This will also swing the monitor over to the side so I can still easily access the computer in behind here. So to control the colors in the room, I have this Govee AI sync box. This is basically this little processing box that takes the HDMI input from the computer and then reads the image and the colors on it before sending the signal through to the monitor. Also in the box are these desk lights that'll use that outputted color data, and some monitor lights that you mount on the back of your monitor, which I'm actually not going to use in this case. So what's really cool about this sync box is it'll use that color data it reads from the monitor to control any compatible Govee light products, like, you guessed it, those strip lights we installed earlier. Using the Dream View functionality, we can add those two strip lights, and then select the zones of the screen we want to be reflected in the lights. In short, this box makes it possible for the colors on the screen to be transmitted to the lights around the room for a fully immersive light setup. Lastly, I had a local artist make me up this neon LED sign with my logo, and it'll be the perfect finishing touch for my dream gaming pod.
Hey Siri, gaming pod on.
Okay, done. Area secure.
Now this turned out pretty dang cool. For what was once wasted space, this is now a whole other room in the basement, and it's surprisingly spacious in here. Any sane person would just leave this project and call it done, but I have an idea that's going to take this to the next level. Well, this might just be up there as one of my favorite projects yet. It's pretty cool how much the motion simulator adds to the gaming experience. If you're in the zone, it helps you feel the track better and make quicker reactions. And as soon as you spin out or go off the track, it throws you around like a ragdoll, which is fun in its own way. If you enjoyed watching this video, I just ask that you hit the like and subscribe button, as it goes a long way in helping channels like mine make better content. Also, leave me a comment below with a game that I should definitely try with this setup. Until next time, thanks for watching.